Ladies and gentlemen, Roster Watch Nation, welcome back to the epic Roster Watch podcast brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, where right now you can go and get a 100% deposit bonus up to $100 with promo code ROSTER at Underdog Fantasy. A bunch of new cool contests popping up right after the NFL draft, which we're here to discuss right now, of course, with our man. You know him well. All the Roster Watch Nation knows this Roster Watch OG, but no longer with Roster Watch. He's now the senior manager for research and analytics for NFL's NextGen Stats. He's the architect of the NextGen Stats draft model. He's had a couple of articles on NFL.com in the last couple of weeks. The can't miss prospects from the draft, the day two standouts, and coming out today, Wednesday, before the NFL draft, the day three gems. His final mock draft, which we'll be discussing today, can be found at rosterwatch.com, and his cheat sheet can be found on Twitter tomorrow morning. A very helpful cheat sheet for your mock draft. So he is, of course, Mike Band. Find him on Twitter at mbandnfl. Band, what the hell's going on, brother?
Alex, great to be back. Great to see you. Great to be almost, from the time we're recording this, 36 hours out from the draft. I can't recall how many years we've been doing our top 10 mock draft preview podcast. So I'm just glad we are continuing the tradition and we get to talk through it all again today.
It's the meeting of the minds. It's a tradition like no other. And Band and I do this because we love doing the mock drafts, and we of course submit our mock drafts for judging in the Huddle Report competition, which takes the mock drafts of all the biggest industry experts and analysts in the draft space and compiles them, scores them, and keeps receipts. And Band, I mean, I'm looking here at the 5-year average. So there's the 133 people that were in this thing last year. You're currently, over the course of the last 5 years, you're in 12th place as far as your average. You're also a one-time champion of the event. Looking at me, out of the 133, I'm currently last 5 years in 26th place. But I'm about to have my worst draft of the last 5 years fall off, which is going to, I'm not sure, 5 years ago, whatever draft, I guess the 2017 draft, I guess was a bad one for me. So when that falls off, hopefully it'll be a better one this year, and I'll be moving up the standings. But that'll all depend on whether we get this top 10 right, because here's the fact of the matter. If you don't get the top 10 right, things can go, or if you don't get it right just right from the start and get a good idea of how things flow, things can go really haywire for the rest of this thing. So that's what we're here to discuss today. That's what we're here to talk about. Don't think there's any way better to kind of start out by just going to the picks, man. So let's start here at the very beginning. The Jacksonville Jaguars. As I'm looking at your latest cheat sheet here, you basically only have 3 players that you're in consideration. It's the same players that most of us have in consideration. It's probably the same players that the Jaguars are considering. You have the narrative out there that Doug Peterson is really in to the offensive lineman, Ike Ekwonu. You have the narrative that Trent Baalke is just so in love with the tools and the length and the arm's length and the Aldon Smith kind of nature of a guy like Travon Walker. And then you have ownership, Shad Khan and his son, thinking that Aiden Hutchinson should be the pick. What do you think here? Where do you think it goes? What are you tracking on DraftKings or any other sites as far as the odds here? Because I looked this morning as I was doing it. I've been sort of going back and forth, and I just see that, for the draft position as far as the number 1 overall pick, Travon Walker is now sitting as a heavy favorite at minus 250, with the nearest competition being Aiden Hutchinson at plus 250.
Yeah, the odds have completely swung in terms of odds tracking. So what has been a nice recent development well, first I'll give you my answer. I think the Jaguars are going to take Travon Walker. And there's a lot of reasons for it. I think there's still discussions happening, or really there was discussions happening until probably early this week. My guess is, and as of the taping of this podcast, according to Ian Rappaport, the Jaguars just gave a big contract extension to Cam Robinson, who they franchise tagged. So they gave him 54 years over 3. That comes out to 18 a year. Do you end up taking a right tackle at number 1 overall after you just paid Cam Robinson, who really, it's anyone's scouting report on whether or not you think he's worth that money. But nevertheless, with that decision for the offensive tackle today of all days to extend him, to me, that tells me the front office has made their decision there. They've made their decision on defense. Now, why are we saying Trayvon Walker over Aiden Hutchinson? If you take the consensus big board, this doesn't make sense, but it does if you look at the scheme they're trying to employ. They're bringing a 3-4 defense to Jacksonville. They are looking for multiple guys who can play outside, guys who can play inside, guys who can stand up and play rover. The idea of having an attacking defense like that versus with Trayvon Walker is really more of about scheme fit and where you project Trayvon Walker to be in a few years, as he is significantly more the projection player versus what you've already seen on tape. Yeah,
and just the whole. So wasn't Cam Robinson set to be franchised for this? Was he set to be franchised? I mean, maybe
he was for the
second time.
So he was tagged, right?
So
for the second time, that's true.
So basically, I mean, with that bit of news, I had not seen that bit of news this morning. With that bit of news, with the odds swinging, with what Mike's saying about the 3-4, I think that it had been up until right now where I was just like, man, am I even? Because if you don't get the first pick right in this thing, you're pretty swindled. That's hard to come back.
Well, here, not to skip too far ahead, but what you could see is there's almost like this flip flop that could happen at 1-3 in the drop, in the jaw dropping case that Goodell reads Ike Ekwonu's name at number 1. You could see the Eagles plan for when they ended up drafting Lane Johnson, when they still had Jason Peters on the roster. And then they brought in Andre Dillard when they still had Peters and Lane Johnson on the roster. If you are looking to build out your offense for the future, you might be looking to bookend both the left and right tackle. Now, they drafted Jawan Taylor a couple years ago. They drafted, they still have.
You're a Florida guy. What do you think about Taylor? I mean, what do you think about Taylor?
The whole offensive line just hasn't played well at all. I think Jawan Taylor is a prototypical right tackle, and to me, that tells me that they feel pretty confident that they're good enough with, at least for the time being, Cam Robinson and Jawan Taylor at their bookends.
Okay, so move on to number 2. To me, I'm looking here. To me, it just feels like, okay, so new regime in Detroit, year 2. I think honestly, and we get a good feel even from these fan bases, just from our coverage of the draft, our coverage of fantasy. The fan base doesn't seem that tilted with Dan Campbell in this new regime. I think they kind of like the culture a little bit that they're building. They think that there were a lot of games last year that maybe Detroit there were games last year that Detroit absolutely should have won that they didn't come away with the wins. Still, with that being said, I see 2 things that point to Aiden Hutchinson to me, and I'm sure that you'll have a bunch of extra stuff. But one is that he feels like, from everything that I've read about him, he feels like an absolute culture fit for the, bite the guy's knees off, chew up the glass, spit it out, whatever kind of attitude that they're trying to instill. And 2, it just feels like if I were ownership, I'd be like, look, he's a Michigan guy. Let's get the fan base fired up. This is a fan base that hadn't had many wins. Like, bring in the hometown guy. Those are the things that I think about. Although we do hear, God, I'm brain full. Brad Holmes. Is it Brad Holmes?
Mm-hmm.
I have heard the narrative out there that he's a West Coast dude. He spent a lot of time scouting Kayvon Tiptoe. And whenever I do look at maybe you can sort of tell me where you've come on this, whether Kayvon Tiptoe even came in to consideration, whether you're worried about these recent – are you worried about the recent news that's come out that maybe he has personal character stuff or maybe just personality stuff?
Yeah. Some team is going to care and some teams aren't. So it's really about, do you have the environment that can handle such a player that has such a life outside of football? And I think you're going to see a lot more of that, as it's really just the next generation of players, that there's more to life than football.
How did you guys handle that whenever you were a scout?
Well, back then, to this day, there's love of ball, and that's still what you look for, because you got to love what you do, and you got to love the grind, and you got to love the sacrifice. That's what the guys who who make it in this game are the ones who work the hardest and have, innate talent. But really, let's go back to it. I think Aiden Hutchinson really is the perfect fit here. You nailed it on the head. They're a cultural organization. I think Dan Campbell is going to be a successful head coach because what a head coach really is they're a CEO. And the CEO has to surround himself with smart people. And it seems like he's doing that, even from an analytics standpoint. So when you see the idea of Aiden Hutchinson on the board, you don't expect him to fall. He's probably your top ranked guy, number 2 in the Heisman. Nobody, does that as a defensive end. It's really also about scheme fit. Aaron Glenn's their defensive coordinator. They run a true 4-3 defense. You need a pass rusher. Aiden Hutchinson's from Michigan. There's just too many reasons why Hutchinson, if he's on the board, makes too much sense at 2.
I think that that's probably the way that I'm going to go too. I do wonder about this next pick though with the Houston Texans. I have no idea where they're going to be going because is this like are they going to really?
So yeah, I've got a theory on it because you're trying to put your thinking hat on as Nick Caserio. What would he do?
Because this is not an ownership or a Lovie Smith decision. This is a Nick Caserio decision.
This is a Nick Caserio decision. So this is a team building theory decision, right? Mm-hmm. So last year you're approaching the bottom apex of your rebuild because you basically have to take on. Well, really, you have to hit a certain salary cap floor. So they brought in all these veterans to establish new culture and establish a new identity. So what do you do if you're Houston? Well, I've got this down to a couple options for what would Nick Caserio do. I've got it down to Ike Ekwonu, Derek Stingley, and potentially Kayvon Thibodeau.
What about Evan Neal?
I don't have Evan Neal on the board there, but the dark horse there for the Texans also is Garrett Wilson, who doesn't make sense at 3. But if you talk about moving up from 13, you could see them take someone at 3 and then move up for Garrett Wilson potentially at 13 or even Stingley. All right, so here's really where I'm thinking with what the Texans are thinking. Davis Mills, they're going in as their starter next season. They still have Laramie Tunsil on roster, but there's word that they might not have Laramie Tunsil on roster beyond next season. So
Titus Howard is a 5th-year option coming up next year.
That is right. Yeah, and even so, if you're drafting Icky, you're going to play him on left tackle and move Tunsil. So if you talk about what is the prototype of what a Nick Caserio fit is for his team, there's he says a lot more than Belichick ever did about what he looks for. So they hit all the size requirements. They're athletic enough. They're smart enough. They're good team culture fits. They're leaders. There's almost this checkbox, and that sort of draft theory is very much in line with the old Belichickian. There's only 80 guys we draft on this board, and we'll trade out of the pick if there's no one on the board. I keep going back and around to this, and the idea being is that Ike Ekwonu, from the standpoint of he had Ivy League offers out of college. Mm-hmm. He's Nigerian born, where both of his parents were college star athletes. His mom was a track and field star. His dad a 6'6" basketball player. His brother's a linebacker for Notre Dame. When you look at just
mean,
of
physical,
the
and he
boxes,
can move. He's mean, he's physical, and he can move, which is all things with the Patriot. Like it's the
Patriot way. So Ike Ekwonu, to me, I think Trayvon Walker might be the impact player that they would look at if he's on the board, right? Say Ike magically goes 1 and Trayvon Walker is available. I think he would be the pick. Then I've got Ike. Then I've got Derek Stingley. Let me say why now the case could be for Derek Stingley. The Patriots and the Texans and everybody are really going to be one of those. Their fall grades are going to be sticky. And so when your fall grades are sticky, that means that when you have a 1-1 or 1-1-5 grade, or even a 1-1-9 grade as a box player. So a 1-1-5 is that this is in Blesto scouting terms. The lower the grade, the better. 1-1 is a high first round pick. 1-2 you can sort of equate to second pick. 1-3 third round pick. That's the rough scoring methodology. But when you end that number in a 119, that means you have some concerns. There are some character concerns, durability concerns. You add another 9 if you think he's not draftable. So Stingley could be there at a 119, and he might still be the top player on your board at where you see, okay, this whole league's going into a speed and vertical offense. I might need that star cover corner. I watched Stingley's tape. I've been in love with him for 3 seasons since his freshman year. I might still have Stingley rated as my number 3 player on the board. The Texans could still go Stingley at 3. I'm going to book it as Icky. I think I'm going to go with the Patriot way at 3. What are your thoughts with all that said?
I mean, that's how I had it too. I thought kind of before I really went back and really watched Ekwonu, and I watched some of Evan Neal. I said, well, I just thought to myself, what is it that these guys want? Because you know that Caserio, he learned from Belichick. Belichick has such a great connection with Saban. They go back to Alabama for all these players. I mean, Belichick, you've been to these Bama Pro Days. Like, Belichick works out these guys at Bama Pro Days. Like, he goes down there and he does the defensive line drills with them and stuff. So I know that Caserio probably would have his eye out for that kind of player. But the more and more I thought about Ekwonu and just sort of what he would. This is a team. They got it. This is the AFC South, man. They got to get the run going. You know, I mean, you look around. You got to match up game scripts with these other teams. You can't always be playing from behind with some pass protector specialist, kind of guy. You need a guy that's going to get in there and move some dudes. Plus, he's got some versatility to play guard. So, who knows if you want to mix and match with Tunsil and Titus Howard and get him involved within the first year in some kind of way. There's versatility. There was ways to be doing it. I didn't know about the Ivy League offers, but that falls into it with me. The only concern that I have is that when I look on DK, Derek Stingley's plus 200 be this pick, whereas Ekwonu's plus 350.
And it was actually, that number was 270. I mean, I'll go through the odds because I've been tracking these stuff. So the odds have moved pretty significantly in favor of Stingley. So what I'm actually going to do for the sake of my final mock draft is probably slate Stingley down at 13 because
that way you get the points for
right.
The Texans.
Right. So here's what I've heard about Stingley, in that some teams won't even draft him, really, because there's this off-field stuff where it's not about. It really comes down to the kid's character and attitude. And I hate to dog any player. I haven't really done my own true background research, but I will say this: Stingley will concern teams based off of what I'm hearing about his work ethic off the field. When you put on the tape on the field, when you put on from his freshman season, you could stand out and say, hey, if I can train this guy, or if I bring him into a system, we can coach him up and he can develop into a good player. Now, I'm 32 years old, not to date myself, but the whole point of a 21-year-old is that they're going to mature, right? I remember being in the building when Randy Gregory just missed his flight to Minnesota and didn't tell anybody, right? Randy Gregory was an immature kid when I met him. Randy Gregory's developed into a nice, solid football player and a good young human being. So there's a lot of times where teams even will give the benefit of the doubt to players. And if they feel that these guys have dog in them and that, they're just waiting to get to the show, and once they get there, they're going to turn into a playmaker. I'm still torn about what I'm going to do in the final mock, because the odds are certainly going to drive it. Stingley or Icky at 3. Right now, I'm going to pencil in Icky and move on to pick 4. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's what I'm going to do too. As of now, unless there could be bombs dropped that they're like, hey, Lovey thinks he needs more corners, and they're going with Stingley. So, but yeah, I think unless we get a really, really, really solid signal on that, I think that Icky is going to be the play there. Let's move on to the Jets. So in this scenario, all those guys are off the board. Look, man, we were talking about it off camera. Why don't you talk about your theories about Kayvon Tiptoe versus all the Jermaine Johnson talk? Just for my end, on the Jermaine Johnson talk, I'll keep it really quick. I think he's awesome. I think he's one of the best prospects that I've seen in the Senior Bowl. He's a Cooper Kupp, Aaron Donald type of dominant force who can stop the run and who can get after the passer with some length and some bend. And it's just like, he's amazing. And when I look at the Jets, I was gonna say with the Jets, Joe Douglas brings in Phil Savage, who's a Senior Bowl guy. So anyway,
that's exact. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, because really I wanted to validate that point. Joe Douglas, Senior Bowl guy, brought in Phil Savage, Senior Bowl guy. So you could see the upside there of why their edge board could potentially be Jermaine Johnson over Thibodeau. So Thibodeau is an interesting character study, because really he's going to be a good test of this new age player who's going to come out with more money in their pocket than they ever had before with the NIL, right? And so you've got a player who really is probably taking, who cares about his image and so forth. And if you're the Jets and you want to bring him to New York, you're probably a little bit concerned. You probably want to bring in a football player. That's what Joe Douglas and Phil Savage are. They're old school scouts. So when you look at it, they're to me, the board for the Jets looks like Icky, if he's there, simply because Becton, from a few reports.
Why is there all this worry about Becton? Like,
it could be an injury thing. It could. So he's probably staying away from the building because he's worried about his, medical checks and things like that. I don't want to speculate there, or I don't want to say that that's anything but speculation. But Icky, from a standpoint of what the tools they're looking for and what they want to do to protect Zach Wilson, that's number one, right? Zach Wilson is a guy who will probably be on the longest in terms of average time to throw, according to NextGen Stats. So that means protection on the on the bookends is as important as ever. Well, if you can admit to missing on Becton, Ike Ekwonu is probably has all the traits you look for there. So if you are following us to Sprinkle, the idea of Icky probably not getting past 4 is fairly safe. Now, going back to your idea of Jermaine Johnson over Kayvon, this is again scheme fit and identity. So when you look at what Saleh and co want to do, is they're going to attack you with. Go for it.
I didn't even think about Saleh. Like the whole thing with Saleh and that 49ers defense and the kind of run stuffing edge guys that he needs to build that group to a championship level. I'm talking myself more and more into Jermaine Johnson, and maybe it's just because I love him so much. But but here's the thing: what's his name? The writer from The Athletic talked about it. There was who didn't Mike Garofalo or somebody tweet he's going to go earlier than Dane Brugler tweeted he's going to go earlier than people expect, maybe even as high as 4.
Well, I'll tell you
there's
this.
Some buzz out there.
I'll tell you this: I feel like, and not to call the Jets out for being for really being fairly transparent. I'm not going to call it transparent, but they've been fairly predictable, right? There have been reporters call out that they trade up for Vera Tucker last year. Yep. There was word that they loved Becton. So there's a lot of potential for if someone in the organization is talking, it probably could be true.
So are you going to go with Jermaine Johnson or you go with Kayvon?
Oh, I know. You've got my mock in front of you. I'm going for the moment, Jermaine Johnson at 4 to the Jets.
Oh, I do have your mock in front. Sorry, I had your cheat sheet pulled up. Okay, let's go to the next. Yeah. Let's stay in New York and go to the Giants. And for me, I'll just give you my thoughts here. I feel like if we've gotten to this point and there's no cornerback off of the board, which is in this scenario it has, then they know that with their holding the pick after Carolina, I don't think Carolina is going to go corner anyway. So and we can talk about that whenever we get to them.
Well, after they took J.C. Horn last year in the first, they're going to take another.
And they traded for C.J. Henderson.
So yeah, and to get through it, this is the first time that you could probably envision a team could move up, right? The Giants have. Really, they're probably going to take a tackle at 5, and I'll tee you up there.
Okay, well, I mean, tackle at 5, corner at 7, whether it's Stingley or whether it's Sauce Gardner. Your thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really about getting the tackle order right for the Giants. So there are a bunch of different reports from McShay, Breer, King and so forth.
Michael Lombardi says that Michael Lombardi knows, and he says that the Giants love Charles Cross.
They love Charles Cross.
That's kind of what I'm going with.
And the concept of a team having a different tackle board than another team is perfectly normal, right? We see it all the time. We see this musical chairs of tackle fits in the first 15 picks every single year, and trying to identify what they might like and what they might fit, or is going to be a mix of one need, right? What's your type, and or where are your holes? What positions are these guys playing in college for them to fit on your, and where can they play? And then 3, do they have the tools to fit your scheme? So when you look at what Evan Neal does versus what Charles Cross does, they're sort of a little bit, you sort of have Evan Neal, who might be a right tackle, right guard, and then you've got Cross with tackle versatility. I think that they go with the younger, more athletic Charles Cross. I'm not exactly sure why Evan Neal. I might have Evan Neal ranked higher, but again, if the Giants have Cross 5, Cross might be the guy. I've got it Icky, Cross, and then Neal for the Giants tackle big board.
And there have been, and I don't know, like we said, we don't want to speculate, or we want to just say that this is speculation, but there has been buzz out there that Evan Neal's medicals might have been there could have been maybe something that popped up there. I do want to just note a tweet from Duke Merriweather, I believe his name is, or Duke Manyweather. Forgive me. So I read this morning, actually. He was not a medical recheck at the combine. So, I think it might have been a report that came out. You definitely heard the reports, though, right? It was floating around out there that there was something up with Evan Neal's medicals.
Sure, and the reports are out there. There's nothing confirmed by a big source yet on Evan Neal's slide. So I would simply say that Evan Neal's still a top 9 player, and whether or not the Giants rate him higher than Cross, I'm going to say no, and other teams probably would say yes.
Well, so we move on to the Panthers next, kind of sandwiched in between these two Giants picks. And clearly what they want to do is trade down. I mean, I was reading the Athletics mock draft, and the guy who was drafting for them, their great reporter, Joe Person, he was just doing everything he could just to trade out of this pick. And he said that's what Fitterer is going to be doing as well. And if it falls like this, it's probably not the worst for them, though, because it feels to me like this is a kind of maybe a run up the card for Evan Neal kind of situation. I'd be interested to hear from you whether you think that that's the case, whether you think a coach like Matt Rule, who's kind of under the gun here, whether even taking a rookie quarterback even help him? Do you think that buys him extra time to say, hey, man, I need another year or two to develop this guy. You can't judge me on this 1 year. What do you think about? I mean, that's certainly not what we saw out of like Matt Nagy whenever they took Justin Fields and stuff.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that? Could they go quarterback, or do you think it's just, man, they have a lot of pieces that they need to get right? Maybe take an offensive tackle, then maybe see if you can get Jimmy G or Baker or somebody else who's out there.
And I think Baker might be the one who they go after, and that's just purely speculation about fit and what they want to do. But really, I think the Panthers are not in the quarterback market at 6. I think trade down is priority 1 and tackle is priority 2. So what you are looking for is what is the timing of the moves that Carolina is trying to make. Scott Fitterer comes from Seattle's organization at 6 without many picks. I think he's, I think that they're sitting with 1 pick in the next. Don't quote me on that until I actually look it up. But
hold on, how many more picks for who?
Carolina has.
So they have the number 6 pick. Then when do they pick again? Yep, they don't pick again until the 4th round, 137.
The 130. Yep, 137. So the concept of not picking between rounds 2 and 3, or really between 6 and 130s, puts them completely in the mix to trade down. Now, who would trade up? Could be your best friends in Seattle. It could simply be, hey, Evan Neal's still on the board for Seattle. They go move up for and take, their tackle who, they're in the edge tackle world. It could be Houston moves up for Derek Stingley. Could be Houston moves up for Garrett Wilson. Because, there's been rumors about
Atlanta.
The Giants. There's been very small whispers about Garrett Wilson at 7 of the Giants. So their number one priority is going to be Evan Neal. Trade down. I still think if they stay, it's Evan Neal, and I think if someone trades up, it could be for Evan Neal. It could be for Derek Stingley. It could also be for Sauce Gardner to jump the Giants at 7. Your thoughts?
We don't get any points. This always feels like a swindle, but we don't get double points for getting the pick and the player right. It's just the team and the player. Correct. So if I put Stingley here to these guys, it would only, and somebody traded up for Stingley, I wouldn't get 2 points. I would just get the 1 point for getting the player. Right. All right. I think it's Evan Neal. I don't think anybody's going to trade up to 6. I don't think anybody's trading up to 6. I don't think anybody's trading up. I think it's going to be Evan Neal.
And just to put the bow on that one is really the only trades that in recent memory, when you do move up, you have to give up a lot to move into those really move into those top 8 picks. Those trades typically they typically happen for quarterbacks, or they're only to move up 2 or 3 picks. So it's only to jump somebody because the price to pay is significantly high.
Would anybody jump up for Kayvon Tiptoe to get ahead of the Giants in this situation if they went offensive line first?
I've just
been projecting the offensive. I'm just projecting with Bradbury likely to be gone. These teams just love Gardner so much. Like I just thought, you go tackle and you go corner, and that's the kind of the plan. I wonder if somebody might trade up to get ahead of them, thinking possibly they could go edge. I mean, the Giants have so many needs. They could probably take the best player on the. Would they take the best player on the board, or edge and corner are both premier positions. At that point, you just default to the bigger need.
Let me tell you why I don't actually think the Giants are going to take an edge at 5 or 7, and I could be wrong. They still could take Jermaine Johnson or even Thibodeau if he's there at 7. But the Bills, their defense over the last few seasons have not played any defensive linemen over 60% of snaps. They are an 8-man rotation. The theory is that you build a depth so that these defensive linemen are playing 20, 30 snaps a game rather than 40, 50. That's how you get to quarterbacks in the fourth quarter when you have fresher legs to rush the passer. So when you look at what, if Thibodeau is still there, I could see them still taking Sauce Gardner, especially with James Bradbury still on the block there, or likely to be moved. You're now in a league where you've got to match up with CeeDee Lamb. You've got to match up really with, the rest of the league, especially Washington and Philly, who are all tooling in terms of receivers. You need to have that premier corner on the outside. They tried to do it last year with Bradbury. They could do it again with Sauce Gardner at 7.
Just a quick reminder to everybody out there, go to underdogfantasy.com, use promo code ROSTER for a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. They still have the super flex drafts going on right now. They have the rookies and sophomores drafts, but coming up is going to be the big $1 million contest. They're going to have a big announcement for this next week. You guys want to get in there. You want to be firing on it, because once these rookies have NFL landing spots, this is the time to really hammer the value. So go to Underdog Fantasy right now. It's best ball. You don't have to set your lineups. You don't have to make trades. You don't have to do anything like that. You draft. You have the fun of having the draft. You can be done in 10 minutes. And then all of a sudden you have an entry you can follow all next year for your big sweat for the $1 million. So Underdog Fantasy, promo code ROSTER. All right, Band. Had to slip that in. Let's get to so we talked about the Giants pick. And we're back to it now. 7. Is it Sauce Gardner? Is it Derek Stingley? What do you think? What do you think here? So it looks like for the number 7 pick, Sauce Gardner, and it's Gardner and Stingley at plus 250 and plus 350. I'll be interested to see if you've been tracking those movements as far as number 6. Is that one that you have scraped?
So I have not been tracking the number 7 pick because that.
I'm sorry, the number 7 pick. Okay.
Yeah, they haven't. I've been tracking the top 5. The 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 have only been available as of a few days.
Okay.
So there hasn't been very major line movement, right?
Okay, so plus 250, and then is Gardner, plus 350 is Stingley. Other than
so
that,
the concept, right? So the concept being is that they're looking at a tackle and a corner.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the Buffalo Bills mentality, right? They know what it's like to have a shutdown corner in Tre'Davious White. So what do? You go out and get the tall, longest, fastest, best man cover, press man cover in the draft, and in my opinion, I think he comes with a lot less baggage than Derek Stingley to put him in that number 1 spot for me. What are the Giants doing? Well, I just sort of laid out the idea of that the defensive line is a rotation, and they're probably looking to add more 2nd and 3rd round guys versus a 1st round guy based off of how much they play. So yes, I am going to go likely with Sauce Gardner at 7, with the very small chance that the Giants are thinking about Garrett Wilson at 7. Now that those rumors you
keep coming back to that. It's wild.
It's because
they want to trade Kadarius? It's because they want to trade Kadarius, or what?
Kadarius is on the block. Darius Slayton's on the block. You look at what happened when those receivers got hurt last year and they had nobody. What is Garrett Wilson's best player comp? It's borderline Stephon Diggs.
Yeah. Oh man, Garrett, dude, he would be a star up in the Big Apple, dude. He'd be there next to Odell Beckham. That'd be cool. A good old Lake Travis boy. Hopefully he would do better in his new city than Baker Mayfield did. All right, on to the next one here, and we get to the Atlanta Falcons, who we just mentioned. And this, to me, Band, this might be where you and I possibly begin to differ, because to me, I thought that this was the Garrett Wilson spot. Just because I know that whenever you're a team like the Falcons right now, you have so many needs. You're not going to be good this year. You're just not. You've lost your quarterback. You don't really have that many good players at any real position. But the wide receiver room is probably the worst in the league. And I'd be interested to hear from you. Wide receiver is a premier position. And when your board is stacked, the best player available at this point could be one of the wide receivers. It could be a Drake London. It could be a Garrett Wilson. To me, I would consider Chris Olave up there, who I've ranked probably significantly higher than most. But in this scenario, Kayvon Tiptoe is also still on the board, and that's the thing. It's like I don't care what you say, but I don't care. Like, at some point, you just got to say, well, this guy's an ass kicker, and he's good. He's got bend for, look at his ankles and his hips and his flexibility. He's got bend for days. He's good. So
he's a shinier. He's a shinier Marcus Davenport. And that's the trait that Terry Fontenot and team and company traded for in New Orleans. So look, the traits are certainly there for the discussion. Right now, it comes down to need versus best player available, or whether or not you can put up with Thibodeau's,
whatever his personality quirks,
or whatever, and they're going to have way more background in psych testing results than we are, for sure. But really, this comes down to, okay, the line right now is minus 120 for the Falcons to take a receiver. Quarterbacks at plus 300. I think that's just more of the market's inflating that number. I don't think they took a quarterback at 8, but it's certainly possible. I wouldn't rule out Malik Willis at some at 8 if they want to.
Their next Mike Vick.
Well, it's the next Mike Vick, but few people know that Marcus Mariota is probably one of the most athletic quarterbacks that nobody talks about. When you talk about what he did with on tracking data, it's Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, Daniel Jones somehow, and
that's interesting.
And Marcus Mariota. So really the concept of quarterback's not out of the question, but it will be for this moment. What if it is receiver? Well, first off, edge. The reason why edge could be 350 is that the idea of the probability
Thibodeau being there is not
there. Yeah. Right. So if he's there, now you got to say, okay, would the odds be higher? And the answer would be probably yes. So
undoubtedly, yes. If the scenario was laid out to the bookmaker, yeah.
So what it comes down to is we've heard reports from Charles Robinson and a couple other reporters out there that the Falcons reportedly love Drake London. Why is this important? Well, because you look at what Arthur Smith looks for. He likes size and speed. Size speed combination. It's their Corey Davis. It's the concept of winning in contested catches and winning
AJ
with,
Brown.
Just a bigger bodied. And Drake London's, I saw him play in person a few times. He's more than just a contested catch guy. He's got some speed. He's got some juice. He can work all levels. I really like his how he can separate even on just hitch routes. He's got a little bit of Mike Williams to him. And in that case, if you're Atlanta and you're trying to build around, only they know what they want to do with Calvin Ridley beyond next season. But two, if you want to bring in Garrett Wilson, I'm walking in circles when I'm saying this pick, but right now my big board for the Falcons looks like Drake London, Kayvon Tiptoe, and then Garrett Wilson. I think it's going to be one of those three. I'm currently leaning to Drake London as that sneaky pick that simply fits the scheme and matches the buzz I'm hearing.
At this point, we get to the Seattle Seahawks, so we're at the pick 9. So we're coming up to the end here. We'll have the 10th pick with the Jets getting their second go at this thing. So you think that offensive tackle is going to be a definite way that these guys look in the post-Russell Wilson era?
If they are on the board.
If they're on the board. You think they'll trade down?
So they're definitely a trade down candidate, but I want to get your thoughts on this. Let's say that
who's the trade up for? Stingley?
So Seattle could trade. It could be Stingley. It could be the Chargers who want to move up. So here's the name I'm going to throw around out there for the dark horse ninth overall pick, and that's Trevor Penning.
I love that.
And why
Seahawks, Senior Bowl, Jim Nagy.
Absolutely everything checks that box.
Yeah.
So now, do you have, I bet they're talking about it right now, do you have Trevor Penning on your board ahead of Kayvon Thibodeau? If Thibodeau is on the board at this point, at this spot, there's been rumors for months that Thibodeau's could fall to the back half of the top 10.
Daniel Jeremiah says that his absolute ending point is at 9, which makes me think his slide won't last past 9, which makes me think that he probably talked to Schneider, and Schneider said if he's there, we're taking him.
That seems to be my guess as well, just because you've
you scouted him. So you're right there in the neighborhood.
You're right there in the neighborhood. You're probably the one of the teams that probably checks him out and says, "Hey, we can live with him. He's gonna, he's fine." I'm not going to go into that side of it. What I will go into the side of is, look, they could absolutely take Charles Cross if he's there. They could absolutely take Evan Neal if he's there. They're, building a freaky tackle with both are athletic specimens. Trevor Penning, if he's there as well, could also be the pick. I wonder if.
Who could trade up? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No. You teed me up to exactly. You're finishing my thoughts right now.
Okay.
The Saints and the Chargers are the two teams that are probably most in need of a tackle in Trevor Penning. The Chargers are probably don't have nearly as much draft capital as the Saints do. The Saints clearly traded up for 15 and 19. So when you talk about teams moving up. What are your thoughts on Seattle? Based off of Cross, Neal, they're off the board. Thibodeau, Penning.
Yeah,
on the board.
If I were Schneider, I'd say I would be in love with Penning, but I would say, man, is there any way that I could get any of these? Is there any way that I can get a team like the Texans or somebody to trade up and come get Kayvon Thibodeau from me, and then have Penning fall to me at pick 13, something like that.
So I will just say this. The likelihood that a team trades up to take Trevor Penning is way more probable than a team trading down to take Penning later. And the reason is because you've got to look at what the board looks like at the position. The drop off after 4 is going to be potentially, you've got Tyler Smith, the Raymonds, the Falelales, or however you say his name. Across the board, you've got. And really, if you see Zion Johnson, you could play tackle. Yeah. And that's who, to sneak this one in there, could go to the Chargers at 17 if they don't move up for Penning. Penning is the one who could go 9 to the Seahawks. He could go 14 to the Ravens, who are also in the exact same boat. They've got the same decision between Jordan Davis and Trevor Penning, right? So you've sort of got these sort of you and I have both seen these teams every year at the Senior Bowl. They're always there. They always love their guys. Seattle, Baltimore, New Orleans, and the Chargers. Those are the guys in the Trevor Penning run. If Thibodeau's on the board at 9, I've got the Seahawks taking him there.
That's gonna be a hard one for me, man. Between him and Thibodeau, that's gonna be hard for me. And you know what? It's gonna be hard for the Jets with the next pick here. Of course, pick 10. Of course, we're here with Mike Band. Make sure to give him a follow on Twitter at mbandnfl. He'll be tweeting out his cheat sheet tomorrow. He's got all the articles up, the can't miss prospects, the day 2 standouts, and the day 3 gems, which will come out today. You can search for those. You can probably just type in NFL.com and type those things in Google. They'll come right up. He's the senior manager for research and analytics at NextGen Sports. A RosterWatch OG, man. He's like family to us. We've known Band now for well over it's been over a decade. I've known your ass, dude. It's crazy.
2012 Senior Bowl, I believe.
I think that's where we met. That was the Russell Wilson year.
The Russell Wilson year. That's right.
Okay, so number 10. If Thibodeau falls to here, they might be tilted that they took Jermaine Johnson at 4. You think?
Or I mean, no, but sure. But I think you've got a little bit of overconfidence bias in your estimation that you did the scouting and you ranked Jermaine Johnson higher, and the fact that Thibodeau fell to 10 just only validated that idea that you passed on him at 4.
Fair enough. Yeah. No, that's the mind of a former scout coming into this. You guys have to do a lot. You guys have to do a lot of justification and stuff for some of the picks you
trained in as a novice behavioral psychologist, you could say, to have to identify all the biases that the scouts also have. No, I think you're exactly, the Jets are in a very interesting place here. And this is where you could see the 49ers come on the clock.
With the Debo trade.
Could that be
Debo trade?
Could that be the blockbuster trade that shocks the airwaves? Debo Samuel being traded while the Jets are on the clock at number 10, and the Niners trade into the spot. Ideally to take Garrett Wilson, who sort of fits the mold of what they, run out for the catch, speed guy. That could be the one that shocks everybody, where they move 10, 35 in the next year's 2 for Debo. I've heard Elijah Moore be talked about as thrown around as their second-round pick last year. That's what I'm considering doing, but for the sake of the mock, Garrett Wilson 10 to the Jets. I do want to consider the idea of Jameson Williams at 10, for the sake of the speed thing. But from what I'm hearing, Jameson Williams will likely start next year on the PUP list. That means he will not be active for the first 6 games, meaning that if you are a team that's going to draft Jameson Williams, you really have to be thinking about the future and not thinking about now. The Jets are sort of in this retooling mode where they're probably trying to reach that apex and try to, field a more competent team, especially when you have 4 picks in the top 38. So this is where I've got Garrett Wilson slotted, but if they make a move for Debo, it would not surprise me.